he is.
Did it say go live? This meeting is being live streamed. The meeting is now live streaming on YouTube. Okay, well, we're on YouTube, but we are not on the right link, but that's okay. We're gonna go back and fix that later. So let's see. Why does it say private? You guys, I don't know what's going on because it's saying that it's not public.
I hear someone else's
Oh, wait,
screen.
maybe we're on there. Maybe we're on there.
I see it on.
Okay, maybe it is on the right one. Maybe it just automatically connected. I have no idea. Tech is just blows my mind. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
so okay, everybody, we're just gonna
we're just gonna go for it.
I'm like, we're just gonna go for it.
We're just gonna go for it. That's what we were gonna do anyway, right?
I mean, yeah. Right? So I apologize, everybody. We are, you know, tech is. I keep trying to say tech is my friend. Tech is not my friend, but we're gonna pretend
Jennifer,
like tech is my friend.
Can I share a story with you real quick?
Yes,
because this
do.
literally just happened to me a little bit ago. I had not been using Instagram for ages. Right. And so when I went to reply to something, somebody finally commented. So I go to reply, and the directions that I had to Google said, hold it down, like click and hold it, and you'll be able to reply, which sounds really simple, except I was doing it on my laptop. Right. So I'm supposed to be doing that on the same. No, you're supposed to do that on the phone and hold it. Right. So I called up a friend of mine and said, would you please explain to me how I'm supposed to do this? Talk to me like I'm 80 and I just got my first iPhone 6.
That's so me and tech, you guys. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're just going to dive right in. Hopefully everybody will find us on the right link. I'll go back in the Facebook event and make sure the link is updated and all of that good stuff, because I can guarantee you're not going to want to miss this conversation. So hello, everybody. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to the Spiritual Roundtable. I'm really excited about doing these roundtable discussions so that we can take real talk to these spiritual topics. Today, we're going to talk on demystifying the Akashic Records. And I have two of my favorite people here with me today. So if you guys want to, let's go Jason first, just because I'm going around my screen, and just introduce yourself, and then we're going to just dive in.
Awesome. I'm Jason 𝗵𝗲𝗃. I operate in my spiritual woo-woo world under the moniker of Akashamon, which is really about connecting the ethereal energies, the Akasha, if you will, with our human experience, and grounding what is soft and metaphysical into practical action.
Love that so much. Michelle, go ahead and introduce yourself too real quick.
Hi, I'm Michelle Adams, and I started my journey with the Akashic Records about 15 years ago. And then it went with my journey was to release all the negative trauma from my childhood. And I've come to realize that you can streamline that within the Akashic Records to help other people release their dark shadow side from their childhood.
Very cool. I love how we all have specialties around this, right? So my heart and soul with these talks, and I'm so glad that you guys agreed to come into this, to come into this conversation with me, is there's so many different topics and so much about spirituality. And I feel like people I was thinking about this today when I was preparing for this conversation, because I always check with my guides and be like, okay, what am I supposed to ask? How am I supposed to bring this through? And what came to mind with me today was like a baseball team. Everybody can have spiritual gifts, and we're all good at certain things, right? And one of the things that I see is people, when they first get on their spiritual journey, they're like, they try to go in and learn everything and do everything. And I'm like, you don't have to do that. Like, if you would not play every single place on the baseball field, right? Like, it just wouldn't make sense. So go with where you're gifted and trust that. And I feel like I have the most amazing gifted people I know when it comes to Akashic Record. But I want to just again make this conversational. And I want to ask you guys, like how, if somebody was to ask you, what is the Akashic Records, what would you say?
Michelle?
Doesn't matter who goes first.
I tell people that it's your soul's DNA of everything it's ever been through in any timeline.
Oh, wow. Good. Okay.
Yeah, I say that your Akashic record is the journey of your soul from the very beginning.
I love that. So you guys both know me, and you know that my background was in Christianity, and I'm like, as soon as I heard about it, I was like, well, isn't this the book of life? Like, isn't that what we're talking about? The first time I heard about Akashic Records. So it makes sense to me that this is something that I'm finding interesting too, is that as you dive deeper into the spiritual topics, there's a common thread that kind of weaves through everything. And I don't want to make this a religious talk, but it's interesting to me how things kind of overlap and interweave into different ideas about this. But somebody was asking me the other day, like, about Akashic Records work. And it's interesting because I've done readings, and I would not call myself a specialist on the Akashic Records, but I've been in readings before where I ended up in the Akashic Records because that's what our guides had guided us in the session to do. And when we do that, it's so interesting to me how it shows up in it. When I go in, it looks like a vast, amazing library. And I'm curious to see if that's how, because I know we all see things differently and we all experience it differently. So I just want to ask you kind of what it looks like. And then we're going to go into like some of the cool things that you teach on when it comes to Akashic Records.
Michelle?
Go ahead.
You're so polite. Ladies first.
When I go into the Akashic Records and other people's Akashic Records, I've noticed that they're all different sizes. The books are all different colors, they're different styles. It really does match their personality and their soul's personality. And so I am always amazed when I go into people's Akashic Records on how different, but yet how similar they all are.
Mm. I love that.
That's a neat perspective. I dig that. I hadn't really looked at it that way, Michelle, but I feel like you're right. The way I experience that variety is through my gifts sometimes too. Because if it's somebody that's very verbal, I might see it as a book and be able to read it to them. If somebody who gets pictures, I might need to give it to them in a movie setting, that kind of way. So in that same sense, I have that same experience of the variety of the way it shows up. I also, for myself, I'll be honest, if I'm just sitting to do a reading, a basic maybe intro reading, getting in the records isn't super glamorous, right? I'm not going into some deep meditation. I'm really just tapping into the energy with someone's request and asking a series of questions, maybe 10 or 15 questions in my head, and I've got what I need. And that's the foundation for kind of an initial conversation. There's other versions of getting in people's record and being kind of more fluid with the information and the situation. They all have their benefits. So it could be logical, it can be super woo-woo. It just really kind of depends on what you jive with.
Definitely.
I'm going to start the recording just because, in case, so that we have a backup. I just thought of that. I was like, I probably should record this just in case.
Good call.
So I just want to dive with when somebody comes to you and wants an Akashic Records reading, what do you think the biggest reason to do that kind of a reading, and the powerful thing that you see is a common theme for everybody that gets, because every time you get a reading, it's a little bit different. And I know every time you go into the Akashic Records, there's always a different reason or something that they gain out of it. But what would you guys say is like the most important or the most prevalent thing that you see when you're working with people in the Akashic Records?
I feel like Michelle touched on the first part of that earlier, talking about clearing things out. I think karma is one of those reasons. If somebody's coming to me for Akashic Records, usually, and this is part of just because it's my style too, it's usually about information or some kind of transformation, which usually involves clearing at some level. But it's also about how once you clear stuff out, what do you do next? Right? And the records afford a really strong possibility for addressing things that are present or past life. Because theoretically, the information that's there, if it's past, it's already in the record. If you're thinking about it in the future, it's still it's in there too, because
For
you're
the
still
record.
thinking about it. Right. So there's a lot of entry points. There's a lot of, as you said, the versatility exists, and there's a lot of different ways for it to happen. The really people come to me, for me in my work, a lot about information, right? And what's attached to what that information can lead to, or clearing up things. If they're starting on a transformation journey, they're starting to look at karma or wonder what things in their lives they might not be healthy. It's another pathway to address that.
I would completely agree with Jason, because most of my clients that come to me, if they're coming to me directly, they're looking for information to clear away their karma, to help release the dark shadow side of what's been going on in their life, so that way they can create the positive karma within their life. If I'm at a holistic fair, that's a little way different, because I've had people come up and go, okay, what is my past lives? So I feel like the holistic fairs, they want it to be like fun and light and just kind of airy. And so that's when I do those quick little 15, 20 minutes. Okay, this is what it is. And, we're done. But yeah, I mean, they're always looking for some kind of information. And I love the fact that, the future, as Jason has touched on that a little bit, you can tell the future in those Akashic records also.
Right. One of the things that I want to ask about, and I'm curious to see, since you guys are both specialists in Akashic records, how do you see that the Akashic records are changing based on the way, because this is something that I just have recently been coming across. So I'm really excited to ask you guys about this. I got the message that Akashic records and the karma is changing. And like, are you seeing that in the Akashic records? And how does that translate to reading the Akashic records, like say 5 years ago versus reading them now? Are you guys seeing a difference in that at all?
A little bit. For me, most people still think that karma is always negative, and they haven't quite reached the fact that karma is neutral. And so it's anything you put out there, whether it's, of the light or whether it's of the dark, it's going to come back. Karma is changing for everyone, just as we get older, just as we move through things and clear things out. But yeah, I mean, me personally, I have noticed a huge difference in karma. Even just events that have happened in my own personal life these last couple months.
I think you're right that a lot of people think that immediately when they think of karma, it's like the whole thing, like karma's a bitch, right? Like what goes around goes around. Like, but I don't feel like that's when we're speaking karma. I want to make that clear for anybody that's watching the replay. When we're speaking about karma in this instance, we're talking about the energy and the experiences that you've had in the past and where you may be moving into in the future. But Jason, have you seen it change? Like, have you seen many changes, or how do you feel like it's shifting for you?
About 8 years, I've probably been focusing on specifically the Akashic records. So in that time, just as humanity, we've had a reset, right? My buddy Dr. Dream calls that the COVID reset, and that put a lot of things in a different perspective. It opened up what I think we've noticed is that beforehand, right? If we go back before that, there was a lot of talk about change. Something's coming. Something's going to be different. Is the consciousness is going to shift. We don't know what it is. We're not sure. we're having faith. It's a good thing. And then when it happened, it took some time, right? But there is a consciousness shift. So I do agree that in an overall sense that occurred. Is it just a COVID reset? No, I think that there's a lot of folks waking up, turning on. In the grand scheme, in the bigger picture, I would say the Akashic records are more recognized and accessible. That the plethora of information that's there was really only identified as a specific thing in the last 150 years or so. It's been utilized. It's in a lot of different cultures. It's in a lot of different shared in a lot of ways. But the modern version of it, I feel like, has opened up the possibility of people really tapping into themselves. And because that is so available now, and by that I mean the Akashic records, because it's so available because of the consciousness, right? People want to know things, they want information. So if they're asking for those things, it's going to show up. Not to mention, just the last thing I'll leave in this segment is that we built, this planet built a global consciousness we call an internet. And basically, the Akashic Records are like a universal version of the same thing in theory.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that too, because I feel the same way. And I feel like for me, that's what I feel like is changing, is that the overall consciousness of most of the people on the planet has expanded to, like, it's almost like when you used to meditate, like, and I always used to do this like a scale. So old school radio, right? Like you have to turn the dial, right, to get to the next station. So imagine like if you're on 88.1, FM or whatever, but you want to go to 105.9, you've got to turn the dial until you get there, right? You have to turn up your frequency and get there. And so when we were in meditation or trying to access more etheric information, more esoteric information, whatever you might say or call it, as in the Akashic Records, you had to really raise your vibration to be able to meet that, to be able to get that information. But now it's like we're not going from 88 to 105. We're going from like 100 to 105. Like it's so much easier to get there because we've raised the vibration and frequency across the planet. So now there's more people being able to do that. And then speaking about people like waking up, I'm seeing the same thing. I'm seeing people like all of a sudden they have spiritual gifts that they never had before, they didn't know they had before, or they've ignored for all their life, and now they can't ignore it anymore. How would that show up? Would that show up in their Akashic Records?
Definitely.
Oh, I see that all the time. I believe we all have superpowers, and the information in the Akashic Records can point it out. Right. Instead of having to wade through it and figure it out all along the way, it can get you closer faster. Right. It's like AI. You hear AI, it'll get you close, but you still got to interpret and put your own spin on it. That's true with spirituality and metaphysics, whatever. It's true in personal growth. Those things exist. So if you just lean into it, right, just kind of go for it. Right. You got to get in there and try the thing, and there's lots of ways that as you said, people are waking up. The access of the Akashic Records is really like a repository of information. And so your soul blueprint, from my perspective, holds the understanding of the skills and the things we put together that turn into superpowers. Because when we look back at our lives at a certain point, we can go, that's why I did this thing or that thing or that thing. And I learned that I was good at this and that. And later I noticed it in my life, and I hear it in a lot of corporate clients, that they start to wake up and they don't want to do it that way anymore. They want to do things a different way. But then they realize how all the different things they've done throughout their different experiences and different periods of their life suddenly come together and come together in that way. And I'm seeing a lot more of people getting to that place, poised for that jump.
I agree with that so much. And I love that you're seeing it in reference to not just what we're seeing across the board, but in the Akashic Records. So if somebody were waking up to their gifts and wanted to get an Akashic Records reading, they could find out what their gift might be or how they're meant to use it. Is that fair to say?
That's a little tough one, just because, I mean, the Akashic Records can say, okay, like when I go into people's Akashic Records, the guys would be like, hey, ask them why they're not using their gifts. It's kind of like, ask them this, tell them this, and then we'll start talking about what their gifts really are and how they see or how they hear and how they feel things to kind of pinpoint their gifts. A lot of times people don't know where to start with their gifts either. They kind of go, okay, I want to be up here when I'm down here. They don't always want to do that work either to get to there. So it's a matter of like bringing them in and going, okay, let's figure out where your gifts are at. Your guys say you have some. So how are we going to focus on them?
So that's probably for somebody that hasn't done their work yet and they're not. Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to go a whole nother direction, and because I tell people their superpowers every day. I can show it to them. I can show you where it is in your past experience. Because here's one of the reasons, okay, is that when we experience trauma, we experience difficult situations, whatever it is, trial and error is what gets us out of it. What we finally find is what works for us. And that's what leads us out of whatever trouble we're in. And it is so easy when you have the information from the Akashic Records to look at what somebody's energy and their soul influences are and say, here's the things you're good at. How are you using them? So when I come to that conversation, I'm not guessing or asking. I've looked at their divine soul blueprint and I can tell them what the highlights are. If they know them, then we can get deeper right away. So, but you're right about the aspect of some people are just figuring it out. So giving them the broad version is one thing. The next time they get a little more detail, they start to apply it, they get better at it, right? You start layering the things in. That's what leads to the superpowers. So can I tell somebody what they are? Absolutely. First session, first time I talk to them, whether they're aligned with that or ready to, embrace it or make the choices that empower that is really up to them.
Right. No, I love that. And again, we're all going to draw different people. We're all going to draw different stages, and we're all going to, like, working with somebody that is just coming into this and doesn't really know and hasn't done any of their work, right? Like, a lot of people don't want to do the work. So that's going to be a whole different conversation than somebody that's like, I've been working on this. I've had my dark night of the soul experience. Like, I've gone through some shit. Now it's time to really start making this better. It's a totally different conversation. And I've noticed too, like, whenever I'm doing readings, I don't ever just say I'm going to go right to the Akashic Records, because again, I don't feel like that's my specialty, so to speak. But I do know that based on what they're ready for, I feel like that leads where the conversation goes and where we end up in the conversation. But the other thing that I'm seeing, and I'm curious to see if you guys are seeing this, and I know you guys work in different areas of I really feel like that makes a difference too, like which area of the world you're working in, because there's some are awake and there's some that are still kind of old in the 3D and kind of hanging on to that. But I'm wondering if you're seeing the difference, because I feel like the people that are waking up right now are like lightning speed. Like, they're waking up to everything and it's hitting them all kind of a lot faster than, like, say 15 years ago, right? 15 years ago, you would wake up a little bit, you'd start doing a little bit of work, and now it's like, bam, you got to do it all at once and wake up. But I think they're ready for it too. Like, I feel like some of the people that are waking up fast, they grasp it a lot faster. And I don't know if that's because the energy is meeting that, right? Like, we've raised the awareness to where the energy is meeting that. And so people are ready for it and able to do that. What are you guys seeing?
I think this can go a couple different ways. So if they're ready for it and they're waking up and they're prepared for the influx of everything that's going to hit them and come down on them, then it's going to be, okay, we're going to breathe and we're going to work this through and, move through this slowly, but yet work it all through. If they're not ready and they have not prepared themselves and their universe says, it's time, we're just going to dump it all because you've been taking your time and we're done with this. They come up fighting like they don't even know what they're fighting for, but they are fighting. And then they're constantly tired and just like everything just falls apart all the time because they don't have anything to grasp onto, because they never started working on it to begin with. And now the universe says, we're done with this game.
That's interesting. That's an interesting perspective on it.
Okay.
What about?
I go with awakening, don't recommend. Right, because you're in for it, man. If you're in for it, it is you decide you're going to take up skiing, you're going to start on these colors and shapes you're familiar with, and then I know I was fearful of the double diamond, the
Right,
don't
the
do
black
not
diamond.
pass
Oh my
go,
God.
right? I don't want to fall over the other side and die, which is pretty much what was going to happen. And then over time, you get better equipment, you get maybe a class or two, you actually get more exposure, and that double diamond starts to draw you in a little bit, and you can start thinking about it, and then eventually you go over and find out if that's too much or if it's not. And I think we're going to do that anyway, right? One of the things that I'm so grateful for in this kind of conversation is that we can have it, right? We're having these conversations, which means that people are awakening. And what's something else to add to everything that you guys have said is that the leadership is in place. The people have paved the way for this. There are folks, there are thought leaders that we can follow, that everybody has had an opportunity to be in touch with, right? And we're the next phase of that. We get to be the practitioners when this is really unfolding, to be the boots on the ground that carry that along. And thank goodness that our consciousness has gotten to a place where we have all of those options. So people that are just starting out, you're so right. They can expedite. There's kids showing up that can play 5 instruments. I play the radio out of tune. There's no way I'm playing 5 instruments, right? So, but to see it is just, it does my heart good, and it reminds me of why we're here and what is going on, because there is that fast pace. Sure, there's those places and pockets where it's going to take a little while to catch on and for the darkness to shift, but it is happening, and it is at an exponential rate in a lot of different scenarios. And I don't see just those results in what I do. I see that in the people in my world, my tribe, my students. I see it everywhere. So I absolutely agree with the growth and the exponential expansion that we're experiencing at the moment.
So since we're going to talk about expanding and everything going bigger, I'm just curious to see, take readings back in the day, right? Was it mostly past life, what's going on, and versus now? I'm curious, how much of it is bridging into the galactic? Have you seen an uptick in that?
I've seen a little bit, especially since COVID. There's been more and more of that, especially for the ones who are ready and they're awakened and they want to know the truth more, because the Galactic Akashic Records is amazing when you step into it. It's like you have everything in the universe at your fingertips. Real history, true history, everything that's been going on. But yet, you know, a lot of times too, it's like, what can you do with the information? Yeah, because we still have to live here in this planet called Earth.
Well, I feel like the game is changing a little bit, but go ahead, Jason.
Well, and that overwhelming factor Michelle's talking about, I think that's one of the first things that happens in any new area we get into, especially the Akashic Records. When we take that visual aspect of a library, right? A soul book. You go to the library and you find out that there's all these books. You just go in and say, "Can I get a book?" Right? The librarian's gonna start asking you questions. So the more you can get directly to the information that's useful, then the faster you can get to what you're looking for. The faster you can answer your own questions or find what leads to that. And people looking for that answer, right? That's how we all got started. We were looking for answers. We're trying to heal from something or a combination of that. Right? That's what's happening to all of us. And when we start looking internally, we're looking in that book. And when we were able to look at our own book, and we can do that with a little bit of humor and some grace for ourselves and forgiveness, we find that it really does have incredible benefits. And it turns our things around so fast because we're looking at our actual information that it allows us to just turn it around and manifest in a direction that works for us, because other folks have talked about it, right? Mentorship, having these kind of groups, having clients to work with, those are the gifts all the way through. And because we've got now an industry, right? We're talking about a huge, like even a corporate in some ways industry here, but really what it is about the people that make it. And we're blazing our own trails and a similar trail at the same time, so that consciousness is showing up. We're seeing results. And I think that is exponentially what's pulling more people into the same processes in whatever way it works for them.
So I'm going to ask this. If you guys don't want to answer, that's okay. But do you, like, I'll share my first experience. And when the first time I ever had an Akashic Records reading, that wasn't the intention, I don't think, whenever I went in. But I wanted to find out, like, once we got into the reading, I wanted to find out a little bit more about soul contracts. And I'll be honest, it took some of the pressure off for me. Like, and I was like, okay, this is how this relationship is supposed to be. Like, it really made a difference for me and took the pressure off of, quote unquote, the perfectionism that we kind of have sometimes, you know. And for me, especially, like, I was definitely a perfectionist. And I think part of that was trying to cover up and not acknowledge my gifts. But then, of course, once I finally was like, okay, whatever, here it is, I'm psychic, so deal with it, right? Wrote the book, Christian and Psychic. Let's do this. But I feel like, so when I did that, and when I went into some of the Akashic Records and the soul count contracts, it really did take the pressure off for me. So what was one of your most, I guess you could say your most profound, or maybe your first experience with the Akashic Records, if you're willing to share that? Because I know it's a private thing, but I also feel like it's good to, for people to understand we've been there.
So my first thing with the Akashic Records, because, you know, my guides are very, they know us really, really well, right? And at that time, I didn't have a lot of funds, a lot of money. So they're like, you got to buy this book for your son. And I'm like, okay, I'll buy it for my son because it's not for me, it's for my son. And then the book comes in and they're like, read the book. And I was like, but it's for my son. They're like, no, it's for you, read the book. And it's all about the Akashic Records. Just like going, and as soon as I opened it up, they started showing me like all the things that I'm reading. And I'm just like, okay, it's like this huge map. So have you ever watched the TV show, The Librarian? And you have that one lady that like opens up a little screen up here and does her mathematical. Well, that's what they're like showing me, like this little screen up over here. And I was showing all the different parts of the Akashic Records. And they're like, okay, now we're going to work on clearing your childhood and we're going to go into this area. And I'm like, and that's when they brought me in to show me my library and all the books and how high it went up. And I was like, oh my God, you know, overwhelmed for the moment, closed it, meditated, and then went about my day. And then the next day they're like, okay, time to go back in. And I'm like, okay.
Now, were you already doing spiritual work at the time when that happened?
Yes and no. So I knew I had gifts because I always saw energy all my life. I could look at my friends going, you know, you might not want to make that choice. It's not going to end up well for you. And I would just always just leave it as that. And then once I went into the Akashic Records, they really started showing me, it's like, oh, this is why I can see this, and I can tell people, you might not want to be doing that. It's not
see, I did that and people just thought I was bossy.
They thought I was too, but you know, and I still do it today.
That's what they're paying you for.
Right?
Well,
that's what they're asking you for.
Back then they thought I was bossy before I realized what I was doing. So I thank you for sharing with that, because I was just curious, like if you were already doing spiritual work or if it was something. I feel like your example is perfect, that when you're ready for something, it will make its way into your world. So Jason, what about you? What was your experience? And not to cut you off, Michelle, but I'm like, when you're talking about, I wouldn't do that if I were you. I'm like, I can remember saying that before I actually kind of accepted my gifts, but I would be like, I can see that. I can feel that. It's just not right. And everybody just thought I was bossy, but that's here nor there.
I would say in that you opened up to more information. In my estimation, we tap into the Akashic Records all the time. Deja vu. That could be a peek into the soul plan. You could look at it that way. I mean, I do. It's kind of a nice reminder that everything's on track occasionally. You know, when we reach into the past, technically that's in our Akashic record. It's not really a jump. It's in our memory. You know, it's still filtered, you know, by our humanness or whatever. But the Akashic Records, the way I describe it, is that it's the original energy, right? Akasha is a Sanskrit word that basically means the original energy. It's kind of like the stage that everything occurred on. So the vibration of what occurs on that stage is stored in the stage. So the records know exactly what happened. That's all it records. It doesn't record the junk. We put the junk in, right? We put the junk in ourselves, and then we get to go back in there and figure it out. So just like you guys and most people on a spiritual journey, I was looking for some kind of answers, right? I had questions and I was following things. Always had some kind of metaphysical stuff going on. I was at the time I was in quantum healing and exploring some of those things. And then I had a really nasty concussion, and I was stupefied for a few months. And the Akashic Records popped up. It popped up in my, there wasn't much popping up at that time. So when something did, I paid attention to it. And the records had been said to me. So somebody had asked me, and I had a practitioner, someone that had mentored me for a time, asked me a couple of times, have you ever heard of the records? I feel like you might have something with that later on. And, 10 years later, I went back to her as an Akashic record reader and teacher. So that it's the same kind of thing, but what drove me to it and what my first experience was all right, I'm going to check this out. I hear what this is. It logically makes sense, but I'm going to use a pendulum and ask a series of questions and get information people can use. I didn't believe that until it actually happened. After
Right.
I had gotten through a few practice clients and worked with a handful more people, there was just no denying it anymore. The proof for me is what sent me over. I was a skeptic for a while, and I just couldn't believe how accurate the information was and useful because it's accurate. Right? It was immediately useful to people because they can connect their own dots, and that's the real beauty of getting their own information.
Yeah, no, I love that. Um, so this is something I'm just going to throw out there and see how you guys feel about this as well. I feel like the Akashic Records is it's another modality. It's another way to glean the information. How do you think it's different? Like for me, whenever I do a reading for somebody, I'm just like, I always set a sacred space. I do a little prayer over it, and I ask for the highest and best divine, whatever information they need to come in. And again, it depends on what stage they're in and what they're looking for and what they need versus like setting the intention and saying, I'm going to do an Akashic Records reading. Do you think it's just a different modality? Because sometimes healing comes from it. Sometimes information comes from it. Sometimes soul contracts come, like there's so many different things that happen when you go into an Akashic Records reading. Do you feel like it's a different modality, or do you feel like it's a totally different ballgame all on its own? And no right or wrong, right? Like this is it just popped in my head as that's why we want to have these conversations.
Definitely a different modality, I would think. Because most readers and healers I know, they access the Akashic Records without even realizing that they're accessing the Akashic Records to get the information that they got.
I agree that what you're saying is true, but I think that's actually why it qualifies it as not a modality. I believe it's an ancient tool, right, that we have access to. It's an energetic database. The internet is a tool, but how do we describe it? You got to sit down at a computer and show it to somebody. How do you describe the library? You take them there and you open a book, right? But it's so much more than that, so fast. And the tools, the modalities are the tools that get us to it, right? Jennifer, you've shared that you tap into it all the time. It's not your specialty, but you recognize you're there. Well, of course you're there. You're a light worker, so you're going to tap in the information. Present, past, future, doesn't really matter where it's coming from. Could we qualify it as the Akashic Records? Sure. We could also just qualify it as Jennifer pulls this cool stuff right out of thin air. We could say it's either of those things. They're equally accurate and true, right? But it's what it is for you. It's your style of reading and your way. I'm all about logic. Right? I need logic, something to stand on. That helps me help other people because I can think straight, right? I don't have to guess what's going on. I at least have a framework. I still listen to what they have to say, but it's all of the things combined, right? So it's getting to the right information in that vast craziness. That's what the modality does.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much that it's just a database. That to me is amazing. What would be like one of the coolest Akashic Records, like without giving away anything of who it was or whatever? Is there a cool experience that you have with the Akashic Records? I know for me, it was really interesting to just, again, I did not intentionally say I wanted to go to the Akashic Records, but I was with a client. We were going through the whole thing, and I felt like her guides were leading me. And it was this huge, beautiful library with these big pillars and, and marble steps. And so I'm like, okay, I guess we're going into the records. You know what I mean? Like I knew it was the hall of Akashic Records. Like I just knew it and felt it. And it was so impressive to me. And it was like, there was this podium, right? So you walk up, the book is there, it opens, and it showed me exactly what I needed. And then it was like, when I got the information I needed, it just closed. And it was like, that's what you needed for today's reading. It was amazing.
I feel like we're going to need a snack because between Michelle and we're going to have Akashic stories. That's probably the easiest thing, the question to ask us. I don't know, Michelle, do you have one that really stands out for you that you can come up with?
So I just did a Akashic Records class where I took a group of healers and got them into their Akashic Records and started showing them and attuned them to that. And one of them is a she has a fairy energy. And so her Akashic record building looked like a big, huge tree. And so then you're going into this huge tree and everything's wood. There's branches and that stuff, of little doorways and steps and that stuff. So that was really cool to be able to see hers.
That's a neat thing you point out there, Michelle, and you said it as well, Jennifer, that it's not as specific. It could be a temple, it could be a bench in a park, it could be a tree, right? It really is what it is for that person, and that's the fun of reading different records. I get to read records for businesses, right? There's a record for Akashic record for a business. Once there's been interactions, right, that develops it. But it's like getting to read for lots of different types of businesses. And we get to read for lots of different types of people. Even if two people have the same energy and influences, they express it differently. So everything that we get to do is just varied all the time. When I have experiences of my own, I think those are probably the most convincing and impactful for me. The one that really stands out for me personally, because I love to share this one because it's kind of cool. It was actually in a guided meditation someone else did. And we were in the Akashic energy sort of flying across the world and looking at the little lights everywhere. And they're soul lights or whatever. We're not, like trying to find cities. But I said, pick one of the lights and follow it down. And I did that. And it's a great practice. It works really well. Where I ended up was on the steps of this cool cobblestone place in Italy, and had been passed down through the families. And I was a young woman that grew and sold magical flowers. That was just all I did. I knew my purpose. I knew what I was doing. Right. And just happy. That's fine. I grow them in the back and sell them off the front porch of my home. Works for me. I work from home now. I'm okay with it. Right. But it's those kind of things that are so real and so tangible that whether or not anyone else ever agrees or believes what I have to say, I know what that was for me and what it meant. And it goes into my belief system and my values and my enthusiasm. And it really feeds those things and keeps me on the path. So that I encourage anybody, any of the things that you can do to try it out because it's going to work differently for different folks. And it's right there. It's in your DNA, folks. Your Akashic record is attached to your DNA. It's yours. You're writing it all the time. It's your soul journey. You should have access to it. That is what I fully believe and why I teach others to do the same thing. I can hand it to them or teach them how to do it, and I'm happy to do either. It's just that much fun.
Well, and I love that you say that it's yours, right? Like everything in these records is for us personally, individually, for our soul growth and going through whatever it is we're going through, right? So, and I've noticed too, like even when I've had readings, like it'll be different parts of the Akashic records of where we find different information and what's going to be beneficial for you at that time, right? Do you guys agree with that too? Yeah.
I would say that Akashic records always meet me with love and wisdom. When I know I'm in the right place, and if I'm in there and something's going sideways, I know it's me because I got my discerning mind. I'm not checked out. I'm asking questions. I'm looking for information. I know for me, I need to process that with an active mind. I'm not trying to bring it back. Right. So that's the advantages of being able to walk into that information for ourselves. It can be the mirror, it can be the movie, right? Whatever you need at the time. If it meets you in love and wisdom, then you're going to get information that's useful and healing. I mean, that's just a given. Right. And that's the most consistent thing I can tell everybody about the records as when you get there and you're in your temple, like she described her Michelle, you shared about your fairy energy.
I totally
yeah. I'm like
oh
right
gosh,
there in
so
it.
fun.
Right. I'm a 𝗵𝗄𝗶𝗄 and I'm happy about it. Make some cookies, man. I'm ready to go. That it's those kind of things that make it so much fun, bring that whimsical nature to it, and it really shows people's personalities. That's how it meets for them because it's theirs. Right. We get to go in somebody else's temple and look at it. Like, what a gift for me to be in my own. I know what mine looks like. I could go play in here and get the books down anytime, but to get to play with others and watch them do the same in theirs, that's where the real gas is. That's where the connection and the consciousness raises.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I just want to really quickly, I just was going to check and see on YouTube. I do see a couple people saying hello and watching. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I cannot see comments today. There's something with haywire with the connection. So I will make sure that we look back at all of the comments. One thing I forgot to say in the beginning, all of the information for both Jason and Michelle are here in the comments. So if it didn't get to the right link, I will make sure that all of the information is in the comments of the show below, so that you guys can access that. Here's his right. So we'll make sure that we get all of the information to you guys. Oh goodness, I've lost track of time. I don't even know how long we've been going.
For about 40 minutes.
Okay, I like to keep these under an hour just because I know everybody has so much time, but the conversations can go so many different ways. If you were to give somebody like one good takeaway about, because I love how the conversation just flowed and it was so simple. Like, I think people make things so much harder than it really is. So I love that we're able to demystify this idea of the Akashic records and bring awareness that it is actually available to everyone. I do feel like it's important to have a reverence about it and go into it in a reverent way, but also understanding that it's available to us all, and that it's not, it's not some mystical magical thing that only a select few can do. However, when you have somebody that's a specialist in it, like you guys, it's so much easier and faster to get the reading and get right to the information, and learning that for yourself. I think for the first time, it's great to have somebody that can lead you through it, right? To learn how to access it. I feel like that's a powerful thing. So if you guys were to give like a takeaway about Akashic records, what would you like share with somebody?
Takeaway of Akashic records: it is definitely your magical soul. It is that true essence of who you are, and when you're able to access it and enter into it, you really realize who or what your soul really is and who you are and why you're here. And it just changes your perspective, and it really does humble you a lot, being able to access it or to know about it.
I love that.
We have a tendency to get wrapped up, just like you're saying, to make things more difficult than they need to be, right? That self-sabotage. I'm gonna shoot myself in the foot every time I try something new at some point, right? Just for me, it's part of the mix. It's also how I learn not to do certain things. And don't touch it; it's hot. The Akashic records is a lot of information, and what I would encourage people to do is understand that it's really just about getting the information that you need. Right? It's okay that it's overwhelming. It's okay that you don't read every book in the library. That's not really required here. When you talk to a practitioner or figure it out for yourself, learn how to do it yourself, then you know forever, right? But not everybody wants that. But an Akashic Records reader can answer those kind of questions that we ask for ourselves. You type into Google, "What is my purpose?" That you're not going to get great answers there. They're going to point you to folks who can tell you, right? But you ask tarot cards, you ask a medium, you ask an Akashic record reader what your purpose is, you're going to get a lot closer, right? Now, when you understand yourself, right? Awakening, don't recommend. It's a road, man. It's going to happen. Right? But as you understand yourself more and more, you learn how to apply the things that you're good at. Those things unfold. Nobody just woke up awake, like, ding, oh, I'm good now. I'm enlightened. Let's go, grow pumpkins and make $1 million. That's not how that works. It's all about putting some of the things together and doing our purpose, doing what we're good at, right? That's what makes us feel good. That's when I say superpowers, though, and the abilities, those are all a bunch of skills stacked together. It's the stuff we're good at that makes us happy. If we learn how to do that and do what we love, right? That's the combination. And we get to express it however we want in this place. So somebody in an Akashic position that can get you a little closer, a little faster, sure, why not? It's your information. So you said the right word. Exactly. And I love the word. I owe you $1, Jennifer. You said reverent, right? My word in that same place would be integrity. The Akashic records hold the integrity of what originally occurred. So when you tap into that information, it's honest, it's true, it's real, it's wisdom, it's loving.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
useful.
I love that so much. Um, I just had a thought that and it left me about as fast as it came in. Um, oh, I know what I was going to say. The thing when you were talking about what makes you happy, one of the things that I used to always tell when I would speak, like back in the day when there was still like meetups and we would have those kind of meetup things, and would speak, somebody would be a speaker at those. I would tell people it doesn't matter if you are a brain surgeon or a bartender or anything in between, right? Like whatever you're here to do, if you're good at organizing closets and it makes you happy to do that, there's a very good chance that's part of your soul path. That's part of your gifting. That's part, you know what I mean? Like doing whatever it is. Because I think the other thing is a lot of times people start waking up to their spiritual gifts and they think they have to have that's going to be their profession. That doesn't always mean that. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So it's interesting to see, like, you hit on something about learning to do what you feel happy at and what makes you happy, what makes you fulfilled, what you value, what you enjoy. And having spiritual gifts doesn't always mean that that's meant to be what you go make money at. Sometimes it's just a gift that you have that helps somebody. Maybe you help somebody some Tuesday where you say something in the grocery store, and that was part of why you had the gifts, was to change that trajectory for that person in that moment, right? Like, I think we need to normalize that everybody's gifted in some way and we all have an intuition in some way, and we're all kind of here doing work in whichever way that shows up for you.
Can I share a quick story that demonstrates what you were just saying? Yeah. Because it for me, what I've recognized, and it took me a while to get here. Okay, this didn't just appear, but I love to put people to work doing what they love. Mm-hmm. And I've learned to hone my intuition and follow those things because I figured that out for myself. And I love doing what I love. So why not for other people as well? My girl and I were just at a tattoo convention here in Colorado Springs. And while she was getting a tattoo, I recognized that the guy that's doing the work, the artist, he can't work his table. Right? And my instinct says, Jason, stand up and talk to these people, because I do that stuff anyway. And I know enough about ink. I got a couple of tattoos, and this guy can't close the deal. So he's doing what he loves, right? On somebody I love. So why not stand up? I booked another session for him just right after hers. And then a couple of minutes later, I got another shot at it. And I was like, all right, let's see if this was a fluke. Right. Number 2 shot down, but number 3 rang. Right. 2 out of 3 people I talked to signed up and filled up the rest of his afternoon. All because I was willing to stand up and represent somebody doing what they love just in that moment. And my instinct said, stand up. Right. Mm-hmm. Stand up, and just because you're going to sit here and run your mouth anyway, Jason, you might as well be useful. Right. And now 2 people get an amazing piece of work from a great artist. I know he's a great artist. He's putting a GER on my girl's ankle. Right. Like, there's good stuff happening here. Just those moments that are available, the miracles that are available when we start to recognize those things, our gifts, and we start to align with that. We start following the intuition. We learn how to concisely understand the channel so we can get to the good stuff. And mm-hmm. Then we start layering it in, and it turns into things like that, into stories like that, into the things you're describing, Jennifer.
Yeah, well, and I think that's so true. Like, that's part of it too. I think the lessons, sometimes people get so bogged down, again, kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation, like they think the karma is so bad and there's all this shadow work and everything. And there is, but it's for our growth. And once we get through that work, it expands us to a level to where we can be present and be available for things like that. It's amazing to me, because Jim and I are still traveling and going all over in the RV, and it's amazing to me how many people I've run into that would never in a million years talk about anything psychic or metaphysical or whatever, and we'll be talking at a dinner or at a rodeo or at a bar or at a, like, wherever we're at, like the restaurant, like we'll run into people and start having conversations. And then they're like, oh my God, this happened to me. You know what I mean? And they start sharing. And it's all I have to do is say, you're not crazy. That stuff happens. It's real. Mm-hmm. Right. So there's those tiny moments, I think, are almost as powerful as being in a session with somebody, because it's giving them the reassurance. Yes, that's real. Those synchronicities that happen are real. Mm-hmm, yeah.
You
100%.
flicked on
I
the
love that
light.
so much.
You flicked on the
Mhm.
light, and that's exactly what you represent, Jennifer. It's what you said you were having these conversations for, is to help people realize that, hey, you're not crazy. I mean, we can't fully qualify it for you, but crazy pays the bills at my house. If you're available to say yes to those things and to have that conversation, and for people that never had anybody to talk to, right? It totally helps. It's turning on the light switch. It doesn't have to even be about spiritual stuff. It could just be UFOs or pickles or whatever.
Anything.
Yeah, but just
Right.
just having that community conversation and recognizing people and accepting them, and that's what's opened us to be able to have the consciousness conversation. And I'll tell you, Jennifer, I run into it a lot, and I bet you guys do too, that there's a lot of folks that are awakened just fine that aren't metaphysical or holistic. And they got a beat on things just fine. They get it inside and out. They understand the energy. They can describe it to you. They just don't do it in spiritual vernacular.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere.
Well,
everywhere.
and because probably in their Akashic records, that's not what their soul purpose is. Like,
there you
we
go.
all have gifts, we all have them, but it's just not what their calling is right now in this time. So, I love that so much. Okay. Anything else you guys want to impart on? Give us some wisdom, give us a little nugget before we get ready to wrap it up today, because I'll just keep talking. We'll just keep having this conversation. So we need to start getting ready to wrap it up.
My wisdom is the show's not long enough.
Yeah,
right. Because I think you're totally right.
I have to be cognizant of it, because I could literally go for like 2 hours and I would be like, oh my gosh, it was 5 minutes. It feels like, but so I'm trying to watch. I think it's been about 45 minutes.
The wisdom I would share is that everyone on a metaphysical, spiritual awakening journey, please recognize that it's just not simple. It is, and it's not. It's easy and it's fun. It's hard and it's a mess at the same time. It's all the things, and it's going to send you inward. If you're on an awareness journey of any kind, it's going to send you inward. So start looking now. Look inward now, because no matter which way you go to heal or do this or help somebody else, it's going to come right back to you. So when you get your own yard cleaned up, the other stuff is totally accessible. So when it keeps pointing you in your own direction, that means it's time to take a look at your shit. Get your poop in a group, right? Separate the socks if you need to. You just go ahead and do it. It is worth it. It is worth it, and you are worth it. You're aware of it for a reason.
I agree with that so much.
I have to piggyback what Jason just said. I mean, definitely when we're into that awakening, the more you go within, the faster you're going to work through it. The more we blow everything out of proportion and speak and yell and scream, the longer it takes.
I agree. And that's something I feel like the whole point of all of this is the experience, right? So if you can allow yourself the experience, even when the experience might seem like shit, right? Because if you're on an awakening journey, like Jason's been saying, don't recommend it, but if you're here, you're already doing it. But like, when you do the awakening, there will be stuff that you've got to face. And if you can go through that with an open heart and an open mind and understand that it's for your own growth, and that it's so beautiful on the other side of it. Like, yeah, we've got to go through some yucky stuff sometimes, but when you get to the other side and you realize what that experience of what you were judging as not so great actually provides you with, it's amazing on the other side of it. Right. So it's go through the experience, and actually, I always say, feel the feels, like feel the feels however you are. If you're joyful and happy, feel the feels. If you feel like shit, allow yourself to feel the feels, but go through it with grace, and give yourself some grace, but also be excited to learn and understand where this is going to give you some growth and expansion.
Definitely.
So, all right, you guys, again, I can keep talking forever. So thank you so much for being here with me today. I love this conversation. I love you guys both. And I will make sure for everybody that's watching, all of the information on how to get a hold of these two will be in the comments below. Thank you guys. If you have a specific question about the Akashic Records, not a free reading, but if you have a question about how the Akashic Records works or something like that, drop it in the comments and we'll all try to keep an eye on it and be sure to get you an answer back. So sending you guys lots of love, and I will see you for the next Spiritual Roundtable. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.